Hi, welcome to the Signature Leadership Show, where we help world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves, and in the process, we uncover our authentic selves. I'm Jamie Mason Cohen, the host, and we are here today with our guest, Elizabeth McCourt. Elizabeth and I have known each other for several years because we have been in mutual keynote speaking and facilitator groups, and we've continued a friendship over the years. And every time I speak with Elizabeth, I learn something with her humility, with her warmth, and her wisdom, her erudition, with her experiences. Now, here's a few things about Elizabeth. Elizabeth is an international leadership expert, speaker, writer, author, and entrepreneur. Now, some people write that in their bios on LinkedIn, but Elizabeth actually is all those things. There's a few other things where Elizabeth supports C-suite clients on their leadership challenges. And a few of the clients she's worked with include, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, France's Global Business School INSEAD coaching facility.
That's correct.
And she's a regular contributor to Coaching Colloquiae at ESMT Business School in Berlin, Germany, where she won the 2018 Best Coaching Case Award, as well as Harvard's Institute of Coaching. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Jamie.
It's all true. My pleasure.
Well, it's nice to be with you.
Thank you. Let's jump right in. What is a possibility or problem you're grappling with right now?
Coaching practice or something I'm wanting to do? I have it right here.
You choose wherever your intuition takes you.
Well, since it's right here, I'm currently in the middle of, I would say the middle or the end, I'm not sure, of writing a nonfiction book. And I thought that I had a long way to go, and I had in my mind that I had a certain page number or something silly. But anyway, I have just gotten back the feedback from an editor, and I have been sitting on this feedback for about 5 weeks because I'm busy, as the story goes, but because I really need to put this together, but she wants me to do an about me page, and I struggle with that, but I know, and she knows, once I get that done, I think it will propel the project forward. I'm just committed to this project because it's part of the work I do, and it's important to the clients that I work with. I think some of my own philosophies, which you and I have spoken about before, but I need to get this done. I want to get it done. And every time I give myself permission to abandon, I realize that I don't want to, but it still remains something that I'm grappling with finishing, and it's frustrating.
What are we missing with what's holding you back?
What are we missing? Actually taking action and writing it, but maybe it's about, I would say it's not a standard type of leadership book. As you know, I'm very into art, creativity, and a nonlinear mindset, as you know, sort of polymathic approach to leadership. And I think I'm confident in that topic, but I think how do I actually put it together so it flows in a way that people can read it?
What's been your process in the past when you've written, I know you wrote a novel. What was your process in the past that got you over the finish line to finish that book?
Well, the first draft actually is part of, I wasn't going to get my master's unless I completed it.
Okay.
And so I had a timeline. They said, if you abandon, you'll lose all your credits. But then to actually finish the project, I just decided one day, a friend of mine who's a coach at ESMT in Berlin, I don't remember what he said to me, but once he said it, I said, well, gosh darn it, I'm going to finish this. And I did. And then I serendipitously found a publisher. So once I put my mind to it, and maybe it was the accountability, which was some kind of accountability that feels real enough to almost shame or embarrass myself into finishing. There we go.
And because you're a global leadership coach who works with some of the top executives and thought leaders, what advice would you give them if they were in this situation where, and I'm sure you have worked with executives who had a major project, maybe not necessarily a book, but there was something that was holding them to taking action. What advice would you give them if that
Oh,
was me?
that's so good. It's so much easier to coach other people than it is to coach yourself, as we both know. I think I would say, what story are you telling yourself, and why do you care how much what people think?
And so in your case, you think that's part of it?
I do. Yeah, I do.
And can you just talk before we jump in and look at your handwriting to see if there's any clues that can help you get closer to reframing this challenge and solve it, which means take action?
Yes.
There's 2 points that are fascinating to me about your work. The first is you mentioned the word polymath. What is a polymath? And could you talk about what some of the themes of being a polymath you're connecting to leadership in this book?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that, like, a polymath is someone that likes many different things and is good at many things, and maybe even has some expertise in a few things. Like, there are, of course, famous polymaths, mostly scientists, as we know, but I think that there's this push in our culture to niche. People are always saying niche and what's the problem you're trying to solve, which is all wonderful advice. But for someone like myself, and I know you and I have discussed this, who dabble in a lot of different things, it feels like, when you're a nonlinear thinker, I think, to the person that says you have to be an expert in one thing, it feels like, gosh, I'm a failure for not only doing one thing. But my book that I'm writing is about nonlinear thinking. It's because I believe you can have multiple expertise, and I believe they all feed into each other. That just because just because you're a speaker doesn't mean you can't be a writer, and just because you may work in corporate does not mean you can't work in, nonprofit or fintech or other kinds of industries. So I'm quite agnostic. I love people, and so when I care about people and I care about a project, it doesn't matter to me what industry they're in. I don't like to be industry specific, which means some might say I don't have an expertise, but my expertise is not having only one thing. That's polymath.
Yes. And you really walk your talk. Can you think of an example from your life, or if you want to move off of your life for a moment, an example that you're thinking about for the book, or of a well-known person who represents this polymathic approach to success in their life?
Let's see. I think, someone like, let's say, famous Michelangelo, if we think of him as artist, but also was, scientist, and how he approached art, and the science influenced the art, and the art influenced the science. And then I have clients. I do work with a lot of scientists and engineers, just so happens, and they're all incredibly creative and often have something they do that's wildly creative. And I think I see the two things as compatible, not two separate things.
How are they compatible?
Well, I think the openness and way of thinking, that you have to be open to fail and make mistakes. And sometimes mistakes in art, as we know, are wonderful. I mean, you as an artist, wonderful mistakes. You make a mistake and you think, gosh, that's, I wanted to do it like this, and you made the wrong color, the wrong quote unquote color, when it actually turns out to be a beautiful mistake that leads you in another direction. So I think there is this element of experimentation, failure, and resilience that goes hand in hand with this very open approach. I mean, maybe even growth mindset rather than fixed mindset, you could say, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think growth mindset is directly connected to being a polymath, in that we can find novel ways to connect things that don't seem to be interconnected. And the goal might not have been to necessarily connect them, but in the end, they synergetically find a way to interweave with each other for something that's more magnetic and more expansive than we started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think more magnetic, I agree. It's a little more interesting, right? When you do something that's, or even to give someone a different perspective, because we can all, and clients as well, get so fixated on what is supposed to be like. And I'm doing this with my book, what things are supposed to be like and what should be like. And I think when you go and take on a different perspective, it just can inform the situation of whatever it is that somebody is doing in a different way, and also take you out of your element. I had someone yesterday that was very fixed in what they were thinking. They really like to do this one thing. And I said, well, what if I walked in? What would I see? And it was an epiphany for them. Like, oh, you would see this. Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way. So I think it's really allows to see alternative perspective, which can inform.
What is your vision incorporating what it means to be a polymath in your book as it's moving forward?
Well, there is a chapter on the polymathic approach, but I think it's, in a way, I just did a research project on inclusivity, just as generally, that it really means if you don't have, there are certain paths that lead to whatever it is you're doing. If you're a doctor, of course, you have to go to medical school. But then there are so many people with a lot of wonderful skill sets that can be applied in different modalities. And so I think this is, the editor was reading, she's like, it's really this approach to life that you take. My own philosophy is that you take everything that you've done and experienced, both good and bad, and that's brought you here. So how do you take that whole collection of things and move forward? How do they help? How do they inform? How do they contribute or not to whatever it is you're doing? And so that the book is really about that, taking different ideas and modalities and using that, whether it is art, if it's music, just talking about that liminal space of uncertainty and how do you use that discomfort to move forward.
I really resonate with that. My sister, whenever she sees me doing something that she finds interesting, she seems to sometimes go to statements around, I totally see why that's happening for you, because it's a cumulative, it's cumulative of all these different areas that I've seen in your entire life all come to fruition in this art or in this research project or in this new speech or podcast or wherever that might be. And so I really resonate with that, is how do we take both the good, not necessarily the bad, but the opportunity and the
learning
and mix it into this kaleidoscope or this recipe of what that new possibility is.
Exactly. And doing it the same way is boring anyway. We know that, even though there's a comfort in how do you do this, doing it your way or a different way is much more exciting.
It is. And on that note, what I'd love to do is I would like to look at your handwriting.
Okay.
To see if our theme has been your book process and as an author, and also what it means to be a polymath from slightly different perspectives. So I want to stay on that theme and see what the handwriting shows us that could be helping move into that direction of that opportunity that you aspire to create, which is your nonfiction book on leadership, and also potentially what could be holding you back based on what the handwriting shows. And with handwriting, a stroke is a stroke wherever you find it. So this isn't based on what I know of you. It's not biased on, it would be a positive bias. It's based on the writing. So I'm just going to talk about the letters, and you can look on the screen if you're watching this in the podcast, or Elizabeth, you can actually look at your own writing if you have that. And I'm going to be referring to different letters and telling you what they mean if we would combine them like a polymath with different traits together. Perfect.
Fun.
So the first thing I'm noticing is in the first line, in the third word, the Y on the U. What do you notice about that Y?
It's like a squiggle and a large loop.
The large loop. So that's called the lowercase descending trait, which is the traits below the middle zone would be the baseline. And that's massive. Like you said, it's long and it's round. Now, if you notice, there's a pattern there. In the next U, there's a large loop. We're not going to look at the P on purple. That might mean something else. But in the second line, we see several tags. The T it looks like a J, but it's actually that large loop. So the point is there are a lot of these large lower loops. Now we combine two traits in this. One is a love of change and variety. So this is a person, and nothing is certain, nothing. I would say no 360, even the data-driven ones are perfect 100% of the time.
Right.
It's up to us to take out what works for us, and what we don't think works for us, push aside. But I found this to be quite accurate. Those large lower loops tend to be a combination of loving change and variety in life, someone who can move to different locations almost effortlessly, who enjoys different cultures and meeting different kinds of people. The length of it is quite long. So it's not just a circle, a circular shape. It actually goes quite long. And you tend to find that is determination, especially when there's some pressure there. So the pressure is pretty strong. It depends on the pen as well. But let's say we don't know exactly the kind of pen you're using, but they're long strokes. So loving change and variety combined with a determination toward pulling out of us our mental and physical wells of energy that we need to reach our goals. I've seen that stroke, that same length of that stroke, with people like Maya Angelou, with Terry Fox, with people who have endured beyond where other people may have quit. They've continued on to reach their goals. So the first is change and variety, which, if we connect it with the polymath, well, the ability to move effortlessly from topic to topic. And highlighting that even more is you have this extraordinary fluid stroke. It looks like a figure eight in your Y's, your J's, and your G's. Your Y's have it. Look at the second line. That is supposed to be a T, but it looks like a note. It looks like a musical instrument. So I'd probably say you also have musical attributes, musical abilities in the way you speak. It could literally be a musical instrument. But that fluency is what we see often with authors and speakers. Again, not because I know you, I would say this if I just saw that piece of paper. That incredible fluency is the ability to connect our mind and our hands, literally when we're writing, with it's like you weave linguistic lassos when you get in flow. So the combination of change and variety with a determination toward your goals, ultimately achieving what you set out to, and this fluency of thought are all positive traits that I believe play right into not only finishing this book, but moving from strength to strength to achieve that ultimate vision that you've just given us a taste of.
Wow. I think actually I like it. Linguistic lassos is a really nice turn of phrase, but I think it's very true. And what also resonates is that love of culture and diversity. And because, as you know, I travel an awful lot, and I love that uncertainty and embracing other cultures. So I think that's, that's interesting. I always write those letters like that.
Yeah, well, because it's what's going on beneath the surface. It's not something we consciously do. Although sometimes celebrities, even though I analyze celebrities' handwriting, sometimes those are more deliberate ways that they sign because they think it might be cool or distinct or eclectic. But for the most part, actually, the writing is who you are beneath the surface when no one's looking. Your signature is what you want the world to see. Here are a few other things. One thing that might be holding you back, which is, I would say, sometimes the flip side of the polymath, which I relate to this as well, is I only see it once or twice actually. If you look at the Y and your on the first line, it's the 1, 2, 3, it's the fourth word in. And you also see it in the first letter of the last word of the first line in friend. What do you notice about the bottom of each of those?
The D?
Yes, it overlaps.
Yeah.
It's a slight overlap. So sometimes when you see this, and again, if I saw it once, I'd say maybe. I've seen it twice. I've seen it actually a third time on the second line on monkey. It's also cuts into the Y, the letter below. That sometimes means too many irons in the fire. So as the metaphor is, you have so many things going on that it can dissipate energy toward finishing one of them. because you have so many fires that are in your mind. It would be like if your mind, lightning is shooting in so many different directions. It's sometimes, if not overwhelming, it's which direction do I focus on right now? Because each of these areas are extraordinarily interesting to me. And it's the mind of a deeply creative person. And this is what I would sometimes I'm challenged with. So that might be something to look at as you move forward as a polymath, writing a book with a chapter on being a polymath, but also in a bigger picture of a person whose vision is polymathic by nature and by choice. I would probably say both, unless I'm wrong, is to look at that and to see how that could be a strength of having all of these different areas that you could focus on at any minute toward finishing this book. How does that sound to you?
Well, that's definitely true. I think that I never find busy to be an excuse. However, like you said, there are the things you get offered to do can feel like you just want to say yes. It's wonderful to say yes. And then you've said yes, 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 yes. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of things. But it's a gift. I mean, a gift of sort of choice and being able to choose to say yes or no, I think it's a luxury problem, but also something to be mindful of.
Yeah. And I think also when I think of the polymath, I think of Gandhi, and they asked him what his message was. And he said, my life is my message. And to me, I wrote that down when I was in my 20s in my journal. And I always thought, before I knew really what a polymathic person represented or was, and I thought, I want my life to be my message. I want to live a creative life that's full of possibility, and I want to be interested in waking up in the morning and having multiple purposes and not just necessarily one path for 30, 40, or 50 years professionally, at least, or even with my interests. So yeah. I know you relate to that.
I totally do. You want to show people that things are possible.
Yeah, like learning for myself, but also learning for others. Like, how can my learnings affect other people?
Yeah, totally there's
Yeah. There's one more thing I wanted to show you.
Yeah.
Your last name, what do you notice about the T? So the T, there's something distinct about it, which I only see in about 1% of signatures over many, many years.
The T is on top. It's on top. It's not crossing that T.
Yeah,
and it's long.
It's long. Yeah, there's two things in it that are an incredible combination. The first is there's a little loop at the beginning. The little loop, you see that little loop in the ascending traits. Those are the traits above the midzone. That if when it's at the top, it tends to be liking to hold on to and grasp knowledge, because the upper zone tends to be creativity and also spiritual or philosophical. Let me be more specific. Loving philosophical and spiritual, not necessarily religious, but philosophical ideas, loving to grasp onto them and dive deeper into them when that loop is at the top. That's literally like a hand grabbing it. Now, the length of the T-bar is an extraordinarily long line. So I've seen this with inventors, other polymath, you could say, like Thomas Edison. I've seen this with leaders like, I have to think for a moment. Well, I'm going to give you some interesting ones. Taylor Swift, Abraham Lincoln, all over the map. People who are really focused on the big picture, on having a vision. Now, that vision, that long-term goal, my camera's moving, if you notice. I have this.
Yeah, it is moving. Yeah. My analysis is trying to cover your face.
If you notice, that's why I'm moving around. This is live, right? So I'm trying to move and talk and define what this means in a second. So once I get this tracker off, I'll be fine. But what you see with visionaries, with that T-bar, is that they're long-term thinkers. They're not people who necessarily are just focused on the day-to-day. And with you have that extraordinary long and strong T-bar, which gets stronger toward the end of the stroke. And just like I mentioned earlier with determination, that's the line going down, which is that physical and emotional energy that moves us closer toward our goals and overcoming some of those challenges on multiple levels. The visionary line all the way is more of the marathon runner. The marathon runner who is not just going for a quick sprint, but if you notice how strong it is and how much pen pressure there is, that is, you get stronger as you move toward your goals. You don't get timid or feel like a victim to circumstance. You're actually pushing forward. And right at the end, there's a little ink dot, if you notice.
Yeah,
this is just,
I do.
Yeah, I'm just doing it with my eyes. I'm not with a microscope or anything. Sometimes I have a magnifying glass. But that line is that top 1% of people who get stronger with their vision in the long term. And I'm also going to say, is McCourt your father? Is that your father's name?
It is.
Okay, so I'm going to make a assessment here. You can tell me if I'm wrong or off. Sometimes traits are connected to the name in our signature that it's connected with. And so in this case, I'm going to say that there's something in your vision that's honoring your last name, your father, which is the name your father gave you. There's something that's motivated or inspired in terms of your vision, that specific area of your life where you wake up and you think of what you're planning, what your vision is, and on a subconscious level, because handwriting is subconscious, or it could be conscious, you think of your father, and he forms, and he's an inspiration for you in this regard.
Well, that's very touching. Me almost made me cry because it's very, very true. As I think I told you, my father passed about 20 years ago, which is why I moved to New York, and I think his signature is a bit similar. I write like my mother and my grandmother. We all went to the same kind of school, but my signature, and actually he was a sports coach and a very inspiring coach that people still come up to me. It's been 40, 50 years since he's taught some people, and they tell me what an impact they made on their lives. So I think, yes, that I think of him as a guide and role model always.
Can you think of anything on the spot that he said, or a quick story that was inspiring to you in that way?
Sure. I often tell people I'm working with, especially in groups, that something I learned from my father was that to really be resilient. That he said to me, Elizabeth, because not everything's going to work out, and you're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to fall down, and you're going to be bruised, but you're going to have to get up, and you're going to have to keep going. So I was like kind of a skinny child, and I was on an all boys soccer team, and he was like, you got to be tough. and I said, I was small, but I really tried to be tough, and I could keep going. I could get up and keep going. I can always keep going. So that resilience is something that has been baked into me since childhood.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure.
That's inspiring in itself. What do you want to be celebrating 12 months from now?
12 months from now, see, almost next summer. Oh gosh, I definitely want to be celebrating, a good start to the year always, but I do want to have this book finished and on its way to being in production for 2024 fall publication. Specific, isn't it?
Yeah. And what's one step you're going to take when we leave this conversation, if not right after, but within the next 2 days, toward making that happen?
Well, I'm going to take this analysis that the editor gave me and advice of, basically it's all there. She's like, let's just get the about me. And that part is hard for me because I don't like bragging but I think just getting that piece done, it's not going to take a colossal amount of effort. It's already all there. So I just have to put it together, and I do have time early next week to do it. So
perfect. Well, I can't wait to hear the progress you make on that. And finally, what did you appreciate about this conversation?
Well, I always appreciate talking to you because I generally, after you and I talk, I'm always feeling energized and inspired. So thank you for that. And I think what I'm taking away is that I know I can do it. I just have to decide to do it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I often say that for myself or with anyone that's writing, that it's like you can fix it later, you can edit it later. And so I really need to follow my own advice. Like it's so close that I just need to keep going, like kind of like a marathon, like you said.
Yeah, like a marathon. Well, on that note, thank you, Elizabeth, for your openness, your vulnerability, your wisdom in talking about a subject I am fascinated with, polymaths, and how it sometimes goes against the grain of what we're taught, which is, the riches are in the niches, the niches, right?
Oh, God, I hate it so much.
I know, yes. Yeah. So thank you for validating and reaffirming that. And like you said with me, I always feel energized after a conversation with you.
Well, thank you. This has been really fun and so interesting. I love what you can glean from, loops in the way people write. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So thank you for sharing that with me and for your audience.
My pleasure. So that was the Signature Leadership Show. I'm Jamie Mason Cohen, and this helps world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves so you can uncover yours. Thank you.